Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Russia says it captured its first village in Ukraine's central Dnipropetrovsk region, according to media reports, while Ukrainian officials have confirmed Russian attacks in Sumy, Odessa and Kherson that have killed at least 4 people and injured over 30. President Trump has vowed to slap an extra 10% tariff on countries aligning with BRICS, calling the group's policies anti-American. Posting on Truth Social, he warned there would be no exceptions for the bloc that includes Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Gaza's civil defense and Israeli forces have killed at least 12 people in an airstrike on Al-Rimal clinic sheltering displaced Palestinians, according to media reports. The conflict, on its 21st month, has killed over 57,418 people in Gaza in dire humanitarian conditions. Israeli President Isaac Herzog hosted a delegation of European Muslim clerics in Jerusalem today to discuss reconciliation and religious coexistence, according to media reports. The latest indirect ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas has ended without a breakthrough. After hours in Doha, a Palestinian official has said, with negotiators set to resume talks on Monday. Italian police have arrested a 33-year-old Chinese national, Xu Zewei, wanted by the FBI for alleged industrial espionage targeting COVID-19 vaccine research, according to media reports. He was detained at Milan's Malpensa airport and faces an extradition hearing tomorrow over U.S. charges including wire fraud and identity theft. Typhoon Dana slammed southern Taiwan with record 220 km/h winds, killing 2 and injuring over 630 people, according to media reports. The storm caused widespread damage to power grids and infrastructure before weakening as it moves towards eastern China now. Kenyan police have opened fire on protesters in Nairobi, leaving one man motionless with a bloodied wound. According to media reports, authorities blocked roads and deployed heavily to stop Sabasaba Day rallies marking Kenya's 1990 pro-democracy uprising. According to reports, a U.S.-backed aid group has proposed setting up humanitarian transit areas inside and possibly outside Gaza. The plan outlines camps for Palestinians to temporarily live, deradicalize, and prepare for possible relocation worth $2 billion. The proposal was submitted to the Trump administration and recently discussed at the White House. The document carries the name of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, and U.S. contractor SRS. But GHF denied it authorized the plan, calling the slides not a GHF document. It says it is focused only on food distribution. SRS also denied any involvement in the plan. The controversial slide deck details how the camps could operate, including security and cost. The vision claims to align with Trump's strategy for Gaza and seeks to replace Hamas's control. So far, according to the reports, the status of the plan remains unclear, and no official decision has been announced. Now we are joined for this discussion by Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant and Secretary of Commerce, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. From your standpoint, how viable is a $2 billion plan to establish and maintain humanitarian transit camps or in around Gaza, especially amid ongoing conflict?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think that you have to recognize that peace, like war, has to be waged, and it's not a question of a transaction, which seems to be the approach of President Trump, but of cooperation, that peace is indivisible. And you can't simply have a transaction of whether it be bombing in Iran or taking Gaza and coming up with some sort of solution which looks very much like ethnic cleansing. This approach, no matter how much money you put into it, is not going to work. The thing that is most troublesome about it is it seems to be of a piece with Trump's original approach broached back in February, that this was a great opportunity for Mediterranean seaside development. And that the Palestinians or the Gazans who are there can be moved out, whether it be in camps in a designated part of Gaza or outside. So I don't think that the Arab nations and the Muslim nations around Israel are going to stand for this. And I don't think that it is an approach which has the earmarks of the kind of cooperation that is needed to wage peace in the Middle East. So it's a very disconcerting approach, and hopefully it will not come to fruition. There is the meeting today between Netanyahu and Trump. The main point of it obviously is going to be to take a victory lap, so-called, in regard to Iran, but you can't have peace in the Middle East simply by bombing Iran and not taking care of the conflict which rages still in Gaza.
And Raymond, now you've shown that it's a kind of undoable, this plan, and also given the denials from the named organization, what concerns arise around transparency, accountability, and credibility when private contractors or aid groups are linked to sensitive foreign policy initiatives?
Well, I think that's exactly right. This was set up really without any transparency to really fight what the United Nations was trying to do in regard to relief. That's a much more cooperative approach, and Israel and the U.S. Did not want to follow that. So this is not the way to go about building peace, and it is the kind of ethnic cleansing, if you will, which the rest of the world is not going to stand for.
And Raymond, how should U.S. involvement in proposal like this balance humanitarian goals with the risk of maybe political backlash or regional destabilization?
Well, it seems to me that the United States, as the chief backer of Israel, has to look at what it is doing to sustain the Netanyahu policies. It's not a matter of whether the U.S. is in favor of an independent Israel. It's a matter of the policies which have been put into place, which are counterproductive in many instances. What happened on October the 6th, 2023, with Hamas indiscriminate killings in Israel is a terrible, terrible thing. Was a terrible thing. But it is not going to be solved by a disregard for innocent civilians. The estimate now is that some 57,000 have been killed by Israel airstrikes and other strikes in Gaza. And the idea that you're going to cut off aid in sort of a starvation approach seems to be a part of what has been the policy of the Netanyahu government. So, in the discussions today, President Trump, and one of the positive aspects is that he does seem to be genuinely against the widespread of use of violence, whether it be in Gaza or in Ukraine or elsewhere. And the president has to get tougher with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And that means looking at the questions of support, military aid. It means looking at the whole relationship in regard to trade and economic development. And there have to be carrots provided as well as sticks to be able to move the policy of Israel away from the approach which has been that of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
And Raymond, you kind of already touched down on this, but what role should the U.S. Department of Commerce or other economic arms of the government play in shaping this maybe post-conflict recovery strategies or ongoing strategy for better distribution of aid as well as better living standards for the people living in Gaza?
Well, the United States has long stood for humanitarian approaches in international matters. Unfortunately, the Trump administration in abolishing USAID has hamstrung the United States in regard to having soft power to be able to help resolve these kinds of conflicts. And what we have to do is get back to a holistic approach, and that is that economics, the security aspects, the providing of military assistance, it seems to me has to be linked to the overall economic relationship. Without that, the Israeli government seems to be on a course which is going to lead to more human misery, more death, and the peace prospects will be very much diminished. So what the United States needs to do is to call in the departments of Commerce as well as Treasury, as well as Department of Defense, and have these concentrated in the proposals that are put forward to Netanyahu today to say that this must stop. And the ball is very much now in the court of the United States to provide a tougher and more salient approach to peace in the Middle East with Gaza than it has in the past.
Thank you very much, Raymond, for sharing that insight. You will stay with us as we stay on this topic. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. Special Envoy Thomas Barak has concluded talks in Beirut on a plan to disarm Hezbollah. After meeting Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, Barak said he was unbelievably satisfied with Lebanon's 7-page response. He described the discussions as amazingly interesting and satisfactory. The plan offers a 4-month timeline for Hezbollah's full disarmament. In return, Israel would withdraw troops and halt airstrikes in South Lebanon. This comes amid increased Israeli military strikes and a recent cross-border incursion. Hezbollah has not yet responded publicly. Sources say the group wants Israel to pull out first. Barak emphasized that Hezbollah must see a future beyond weapons, including a role as a political party. Lebanon has created a committee to finalize a counter-proposal. The envoy said both Lebanon and Israel seek a path to peace and end this hostility. Let's listen in to what the U.S. Special Envoy Thomas Barak had to say.
What we're doing is saying, you want change, you change it, and we'll be there to support you. If you don't want change, it's no problem. The rest of the region is moving at Mach speed, and you will be left behind. Sadly, you will be left behind. And this is really the message. It's the message from Secretary Rubio, it's the message from President Trump, it's the message from the world. It's come on, get with it. You're the pearl of the Mediterranean. Before anybody, the world looked at Lebanon and said, this is the bridge between East and West. This is the most amazing and resilient people in the world. How can we not get it together?
Now we go back to our discussion with Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant and Secretary of Commerce. Thank you, Raymond, for staying with us. How might successful disarmament and de-escalation in southern Lebanon open up new economic opportunities for U.S. as well as other countries and maybe U.S. investment in the region?
Well, it's perfectly plain that the attempt to bring peace and stability in the Middle East has to be viewed indivisibly. You can't say that you're going to just treat Hezbollah in one way, you're going to treat Gaza in another way, and you're going to do something else with Iran. These things have to be viewed in combination. And the ingredient which has to be involved is Israeli policy overall in terms of what happens with Palestinians, whether they be still within Israel or they be displaced. And the whole idea that somehow Israel is going to be able to have the kind of peace and prosperity that it wants to have for its people without looking at what is justice for Palestinians and Palestinians who have been displaced and those who are in Gaza and in southern Lebanon is not going to work. And again, with Lebanon, there has to be a combination of economic incentives, the carrots, if you will, as well as the sticks, if you will, of military kinds of action. And thus far, the Netanyahu government, and supported by the Trump administration, has not taken this holistic approach to it, but has basically said that might is going to make right, and that somehow this will bring peace and prosperity. That isn't to denigrate the role of military force, if you will, but it is to say that it is not a complete solution. It never has been, and it isn't going to work this time around either.
Thank you very much, Raymond, for sharing that insight. You will stay with us as we stay on North America. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington for a series of meetings, but unlike his previous visits, this year there are no public appearances or press conference scheduled today. According to the White House, Netanyahu's arrival this evening will be closed to the press. He will then have a private dinner with President Donald Trump and their wives. Ahead of the dinner, Netanyahu is set to meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff at the Blair House. Where he's staying, he's expected to meet Vice President J.D. Vance and members of Congress on Capitol Hill. Later, Netanyahu will visit the Pentagon for talks with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth before hosting a gala for Jewish and evangelical leaders. Netanyahu is scheduled to return to Israel on Thursday. Many of his meetings remain unannounced, with the schedule described as fluid. Now we go back to our guest with Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant and Secretary of Commerce. Thank you, Raymond, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, what role does economic diplomacy play behind closed doors in visits like this, particularly concerning U.S.-Israel?
Well, I hope very much that the fact that a lot of this is taking place behind closed doors means a shift, which I have advocated, to an approach which includes economic as well as military factors. However, having said that, and having seen the track record of President Trump, it seems very unlikely that there is going to be the kind of behind-the-scenes work which will not be brought forth to the public. You have indicated that the spokesperson has said that the agenda and itinerary is fluid, and if past is an indication, at some point President Trump is going to try to turn this into a personal triumph for himself and his administration. So I think it's very welcome that a lot of this is happening behind the scenes, that it's happening both with economic agencies as well as the military, but I am skeptical that there won't be the usual President Trump approach in the longer run to say, yes, I have made a great triumph out of this visit.
Thank you very much, Raymond Vickery, for joining us today and sharing that insight all the way from U.S. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to make his first trip to Asia since assuming office, with a visit to Malaysia starting tomorrow. The trip will commence on July 8th and conclude on July 12th. Rubio will be attending several key meetings, including the ASEAN United States Post-Ministerial Conference, the East Asia Summit Foreign Ministers Meeting, and the ASEAN Regional Forum Foreign Ministers Meeting. The Secretary's visit comes amid growing concerns over China's influence in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly in the South China Sea. Rubio's focus during the trip will be to reaffirm the United States' commitment to a free, open, and secure Indo-Pacific region, while also strengthening ties with ASEAN allies. The U.S. will also look to build on its comprehensive partnership with Malaysia as Rubio meets with senior Malaysian government officials. This marks a significant diplomatic effort as the U.S. aims to reassert its influence in the region, shifting attention from the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. Now we're joined by Peter Cordillo. He's a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities. Thank you, Peter, for joining us today. Good to see you. What opportunities exist for expanding U.S.-ASEAN economic partnership, particularly with Malaysia?
I think the opportunities are great, and obviously, Secretary of the State, Secretary of State Rubio will obviously lay out plans for economic agreements, and of course, hopefully by that time, the tariffs will already, there will be tariffs agreements, and if not, then I am quite certain that they will try to smooth things out, and of course reach agreements that would be beneficial both for the Asian countries as well as the United States.
And Peter, how might increased U.S. engagement in the Indo-Pacific region impact American businesses as well as supply chains and manufacturing?
Yeah, that's very important. And of course, the key there is the supply chain. And of course, if there are interruptions of that, then obviously things can get quite nasty, not only for the United States, but for us Asian as well. So I think, the trade tariffs, the tariffs are a very important subject when it comes to the world economies and to the individual nations. And therefore, it's very imperative that deals are made so everyone can benefit by it. Of course, no one wants to pay more, obviously not, but that's the direction of the Trump administration. And I think it's necessary that the trade wars, the trade war doesn't continue and doesn't get into a situation where it could have havoc on the global economy.
Thank you very much, Peter Cordillo, for joining us and sharing your expertise as Chief Market Economist at Spartan Capital Securities. Now we move on to our next news. The World Food Programme has said that it has airdropped emergency food aid to over 40,000 people in remote parts of South Sudan, where escalating conflict has cut off access and pushed communities to the brink of famine. Let's listen into what an asylum seeker from South Sudan had to say.
Kon me nyu ne tele mena ya jang ne tong mi na ko na pur ka bel ma me se daga ma bana tele mi de shunyi na ni sian.
The airdrops marked the first WFP access in over 4 months to Nasser and Ulang countries' areas now only reachable by air. The UN says more than 1 million people in Upper Nile state face acute hunger, including 32,000 in catastrophic conditions, a number that has tripled since violence flared in March. The conflict has blocked crucial river routes used to deliver aid, while funding shortfalls have forced the WFP to prioritize only the most vulnerable. The agency is seeking $274 million to sustain operations through December. Now we have guests joining us. Martin Sai writes, he's a foreign affairs expert joining us live from Ecuador. Thank you, Martin, for joining us today. What are the main challenges that's faced by humanitarian organizations like the WFP when delivering aid in conflict zones?
This is a very complicated and historical challenge. South Sudan is one of the youngest nations in the world. They got their independence in 2011, and they have been in a challenge with a lot of rebel groups, government, para-governmental groups that are terrorizing several ethnic groups who want to be independent. They have also a lot of problems with their with floods and with the lack of natural resources for food, and so this is a complete chaos. It's a political chaos. It's related to the geographic situation, and it's very complicated for the UN to get access to these people that are in need of food. The UN is going to do a lot in order to help these people, increasing the budget and increasing the humanitarian help for these ethnic groups that have been forgotten for a lot of time. But these challenges are very complicated for the UN to finish in a short period of time.
Thank you, Martin, for sharing that insight. You will stay with us as we stay on the topic. Cyprus is once again at the center of renewed peace efforts as rival leaders prepare to meet in New York next week under UN mediation. The island has remained divided since 1974 following a Turkish invasion triggered by a coup in Nicosia, backed by Greece's military junta. UN envoy Maria Angela Holgun met with both Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulides and Turkish Cypriot leader Ersin Tatar this week, urging them to focus on the island's future and prosperity. The talks, scheduled for July 16 and 17, will be hosted by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and aim to build on modest progress made in March, when both sides agreed on confidence-building steps like opening new crossing points and cooperating on solar energy and demining. With expectations cautious but hopes renewed, all eyes now turn to New York for what could be the most significant step in years towards ending the island's decades-long division. Now we're joined by our guest Martin Seirites for this discussion. Martin, thank you for staying with us. Now, looking at Cyprus, there are two countries claiming that island. How can they move forward? What key challenges must these rival leaders overcome?
Well, this is a little bit complicated because even though half of Cyprus is considered a UN nation, part of the European Union, both sides do not recognize themselves, so there's still no 100% recognition of two nations and a two-state solution for the island. We need to remember the background of this conflict. When Greece wanted to recognize Cyprus as part of Greece, the Turkish authorities sent people to save the interests of the Turkish population that they were living there. Since then, since 1974, the island has been divided between these two ethnic groups, the Turkish ethnic group and the Greek ethnic group. And basically what the UN is trying to do is trying to conciliate between these two nations in order to finally recognize these two states in one island, something that is a little bit difficult, but the UN is sending their delegates, in this case Maria Angela Holguin, for trying to conciliate between these two nations. And let's see what's going on. The UN has all of the intentions to make peace in this island, even though the conflict is not a bellic conflict, or it's not like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is very problematic. So right now the UN is trying to give talks, to give hope in order to recognize these two nations and to normalize the relationship between these two sides of this island.
And can you please tell us how significant are confidence-building measures like opening crossing points and cooperating on demining and maybe energy bolstering in this particular region?
I think this is a case of going to peace through energetic and economical development. At the end of the day, what people want is to develop their nations, their life standards, and sometimes economical trade, improving infrastructure and helping with improving the infrastructure of the country can help to go into a negotiation of peace. I think these are little steps that can go to a final conclusion, such as a recognition from one side to the other and to the normalization of relations between two nations.
Thank you, Martin, for sharing that insight. You will stay with us as we move on to our next news. Kenyan police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse protesters in Nairobi today as activists marked 35 years since the 1990 pro-democracy Saba Saba rallies. Kenyan rally every year on July 7th to mark the date in 1990 when opponents of then-President Daniel Arap Moi launched a bid to transform the country into a multi-party democracy. Security was tight across the capital, with major roads blocked and vehicle access restricted. Most businesses, including schools and shopping centers, remained shut in anticipation of unrest. People in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, say they have never witnessed the central business district as deserted, as police have blocked main roads and businesses stayed shut. Let's take a listen.
I've never seen the CBD being deserted like this. This is one of the things which shows now people are being tired of this government. You see businesses are closed everywhere, people are in the house, the economy is being affected. Now you see the government raises it is revenue from the businesses. You see now the government is losing. The constitution say the power belongs to people. So we are the people who speak or who want the president to go out, because what he has promised to the country is not delivering. So this slogan of Ruto must go, we will not relent and we will keep it going each and every day. So it is possible because power belongs to us.
The demonstrations come amid growing public anger over police brutality, government corruption, and the high cost of living. In outlying areas like Kitengela, police also used tear gas to disperse crowds who had lit bonfires and blocked roads. Now we're joined by Mahmoud Muhammad Nuruddin. He's an African research journalist. Thank you, Mahmoud, for joining us today. Good to see you. What does the heavy police presence and use of force during the Sabah anniversary protests suggest about the current state of democracy and civil liberties in Kenya?
So many people have described the situation in Kenya as very bad, which shouldn't have happened, and therefore must be taken a second look at, because if the people are protesting, they have the right to protest, especially when the government knows that this event happens annually, and so there was no need for this force to be applied for the citizens of Kenya, because this is their right to also protest on what is happening in the country. And so it paints a bad picture of governance in that part of the country or in that part of Africa, where governments would want to use security forces to prevent people from doing their civic duty, that is to protest against what they think doesn't really work well for them. And so it's been a topic of discussion across the African continent, where many people, human rights activists, are actually speaking against it. I mean, if you remember yesterday, for instance, there was an armed gang that attacked the headquarters of the Kenyan Human Rights Commission, where leaders actually called for an end to state violence. And then the commission was hosting a press conference to end arbitrary arrest and enforce disappearance, and for disappearance and extrajudicial killings of citizens of Kenya. So while the press conference was ongoing, about 20 armed men attacked those there. We understand some items were also stolen. So these are some of the things that, many people think that things are not really working well in Kenya, and therefore the government must be able to do something to ensure that people can be able to express and actually exercise their right to protest in that part of the African continent.
And Mahmoud, in what ways can Kenyan government balance maintaining public order with respecting citizens' rights to peaceful assembly and protest?
Well, so if you look at the situation in Kenya, basically the citizens are demanding about three things: good governance, accountability, and justice for victims of police brutality. And so when citizens are demanding these basic things, they would want the government to act. And therefore, if the government begins to act on these things, especially the justice for victims of police brutality, then you are likely to see the people, exercising restraint or even applauding the government for their work. But the Kenyans are seeing it more like everyday talk. Nobody is doing anything about it. And so they would want to continue to protest to ensure that the government or the president would act and ensure their demands are met. So if the government is able to address the issues there, sometimes you would need to begin to act, not just to talk about what the people want, but to act and show a commitment that you are ready to ensure that life will be better for them. And I think that if the government or the president of Kenya begins to address this issue by taking action, I'm sure the citizens would also understand that the government is on the right track, and it needs time to be able to implement some of the policies that would help to address the challenges they face in Kenya.
Thank you, Mahmoud Nuruddin, for sharing that insight all the way from Kenya. Now we move on to our next news. Russia's former transport minister Roman Starovoyt has died by suicide hours after being dismissed by President Vladimir Putin. State media reports that Starovoyt shot himself in a Moscow suburb. The investigation committee found his body in his car. His dismissal was announced earlier on the same day today. The reasons behind his actions have not been disclosed. This shocking development comes amid ongoing political tensions in Russia. Authorities are continuing their investigation. Now we move on to our next news. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has accused Israel of attempting to assassinate him by bombarding a site where he was holding a meeting. In an interview with U.S. commentator Tucker Carlson, Pezeshkian claimed Israel targeted the area, but the attempt failed. He clarified the United States was not involved. The Iranian leader did not specify whether the attack occurred during last month's 12-day war between Iran and Israel, which ended with a truce days ago. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has signaled a willingness to restart nuclear negotiations with the United States, saying his country has no problem with resuming talks, but only if mutual trust can be rebuilt. Pezeshkian told U.S. media figure Tucker Carlson, "We see no problem in re-entering the negotiations. There is a condition for restarting the talks. How are we going to trust the United States again?" This statement marks a potential thaw in tensions between the two countries amid ongoing concerns over Iran's nuclear program and regional security dynamics involving Israel and the broader Middle East conflict. Diplomatic efforts will now focus on whether this trust can be restored to pave the way for meaningful dialogue. Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for an attack on a commercial vessel in the Red Sea that forced its crew to abandon the ship. The group said it targeted the bulk carrier Magic Seas with 2 drone boats, multiple missiles, and drones. The ship caught fire and began sinking off Yemen's Hodeidah port. Israel responded with airstrikes on Houthi-held ports and facilities, including a power plant and the Galaxy Leader, a ship seized by the group in 2023. In response, the Houthis launched missiles at Israel, which the IDF said it tried to intercept. No casualties were reported. Let's listen into what the Houthi military spokesperson had to say.
استهدفت القوات البحرية والقوة الصاروخية وسلاح الجو المسير في القوات المسلحة اليمنية سفينة ماجيك سيز التابعة لشركة انتهكت حظر الدخول إلى موانئ فلسطين المحتلة، وذلك بزورقين مسيرين و5 صواريخ باليستية ومجنحة و3 طائرات مسيرة. وكان من نتائج العملية ما يلي: إصابة السفينة إصابة مباشرة وتسرب المياه إليها وهي الآن معرضة للغرق. سماح قواتنا للطاقم بمغادرة السفينة. جاءت عملية الاستهداف في البحر الأحمر، وذلك بعد نداءات وتحذيرات وجهتها قواتنا البحرية للسفينة المذكورة، إلا أن طاقمها رفض كل تلك التحذيرات. عملياتنا مستمرة في استهداف عمق الكيان الإسرائيلي في فلسطين المحتلة، وكذا منع الملاحة الإسرائيلية في البحرين الأحمر والعربي، وتعطيه لميناء أم الرشراش حتى وقف العدوان على غزة ورفع الحصار عنها.
Move on to our next news. The United Kingdom marked 20 years since the deadly 7/7 London bombings. King Charles paid tribute to the courage and compassion shown that day. He called on Britons to stand united against hate. Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Mayor Sadiq Khan laid wreaths at Hyde Park at 8:50 a.m., the time the first bomb exploded. A national service followed at St. Paul's Cathedral. Survivors, police, and rescue workers gathered to honor the lives lost. 52 people died, over 770 were injured. Starmer said, "Those who tried to divide us have failed." The attack remains a defining moment in Britain's modern history. Let's listen in.
Hope is optimism with a broken heart. In the face of tragedy, optimism fails, but hope presents itself as a survival tool for the tenacity of the spirit that is in all of us. The good which is in Londoners is not erased by hatred or threat, but rather it's fostered to produce a harvest of hope for each generation.
The summer camp devastated by flash floods in Texas says 27 of its campers and counselors have died. State officials now put the overall death toll from the disaster at more than 80, and they warn that number will almost certainly rise. Camp Mystic, a nearly century-old Christian girls' camp on the banks of the Guadalupe River, says its community is grieving deeply. In their statement, camp officials said they are working closely with local and state authorities who are using every possible resource to search for the missing girls. They added they are deeply grateful for the overwhelming support from first responders, the community, the leaders, and at every level. Swollen by torrential pre-dawn downpours, the Guadalupe River turned into a deadly torrent in less than an hour, cutting straight through Caryville. Most of the deaths happened along the town's riverfront, where Kerr County's sheriff says 68 people died, including 28 children. Now we move on to our next news. Over 2,000 refugees from Myanmar have crossed into Mizoram in just the past few days as intense fighting continues between rebel groups and the Myanmar military. Most of them, women, children, and elderly civilians, entered through Champai district and are now sheltering in border villages like Quang Pa, Waikal Tlang, and Zokhao Thar. This fresh influx brings the total number of Myanmar refugees in Mizoram to nearly 36,500 people. Spread across 11 districts, the state has now activated around 150 relief camps to handle the growing crisis. Despite tighter border security, Assam Rifles are still allowing civilians to enter on humanitarian grounds. Local community groups, village councils, and NGOs are stepping up relief efforts of offering food, shelter, and medical care, even as resources stretch thin. Mizoram shares close ethnic and cultural ties with Myanmar's Chin population, and the state has maintained a compassionate stance throughout. Officials say most refugees hope to return home once peace returns. But for now, the situation remains tense, and the state is watching developments closely. Now we move on to our next news. Syria is battling its fourth day of raging wildfires in the coastal province of Latakia, where authorities say around 100 square kilometers of forest have been destroyed. Firefighters from Jordan joined Syrian emergency crews on Sunday, a day after Turkey sent aid. Take a listen to what a Syrian civil defense emergency and disaster manager in Latakia had to say. Minister for Emergencies Raed Al-Saleh called it an environmental disaster, saying hundreds of thousands of trees across 28 locations had turned to ash. The United Nations has called for more international assistance as local teams struggle with tough terrain, extreme heat, strong winds, and the danger of unexploded ordnance. Some villages have been evacuated as the fires raged near the Turkish border. Now let's take a look at some of the top stories from around the world of sports. Multiple world champion Ricky Hatton is making a surprise return to the ring. The Manchester boxing legend, who turns 47 this October, will face the UAE's Asa Alda in a middleweight fight on December 2nd in Dubai. Hatton last fought in an exhibition against Marco Antonio Barella in 2022, but his last official professional fight was in 2012, when he lost to Vyacheslav Senchenko. The fight was announced during a show promoted by Alda in Dubai on Sunday. Hatton confirmed his return via live stream, explaining he was supposed to attend in person but injured his eye in a freak accident with his sunglasses. Rising Russian star Mira Andreeva, just 18 years old, has teamed up with former Wimbledon champion Conchita Martinez in a partnership they hope will deliver her first Grand Slam title at SW19. Martinez, who won Wimbledon in 1994 and coached Garbine Muguruza to victory in 2017, says Andreeva is already a complete player but still has plenty of room to grow. Coming in as the 7th seed, Andreeva has breezed through the draw, while other big names have struggled. She faces American Emma Navarro in the last 16 and is seen as a serious title contender, thanks to her tenacity, strong defense, and a sharper serve. Wimbledon officials have blamed human error for an embarrassing malfunction of the tournament's electric line calling system. Chiefs admitted that staff accidentally switched off the technology on a section of center court during Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova's fourth-round match against Sonay Kartal. Wimbledon issued an apology to both players, confirming that the system had been deactivated by mistake and that the umpire had no idea it was offline. Few gave Bangladesh much hope of qualifying for the Women's Asian Cup, but the Bengal Tigeresses defied the odds last week to book their ticket to Australia. Ranked 128th in the world, Bangladesh won all 3 games in Yangon to top their group, despite losing several veteran players and their all-time top scorer, Sabina Khatun. English coach Peter Butler, who took over last year, said he's proud of his players, calling their effort a reward for sacrifice and discipline. Now Bangladesh will play in their first continental tournament, with fans giving the team a hero's welcome back in Dhaka. All-star Fernando Tatis Jr. helped the San Diego Padres beat the Texas Rangers 4-1, scoring the tying run in the 3rd and doubling in the go-ahead run in the 4th as the Padres took the series 2-1. Tatis reached base 4 times, while Martin Maldonado and Jake Cronenworth added insurance runs. Kylie Hart got the win, and Robert Suarez earned his 25th save to tie for the Major League lead. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.